Hi there, Matt and Steph here again. Good to see you. I can't actually see you, but you can see us. So I'm here. I want to chat with Matt for a second about his theory that a product that we have here in Whistler, which are the phase 2 condo hotels. They can be used for 28 days in the winter and 28 days in the summer by the owners, and the rest of the time they're generating revenue for the owners. Most of our hotels are set up like this, with the exception of very, very few. But you actually own the room in the hotel. It's your room. I want to ask Matt what his theory is about the pricing and the movement of those as a canary in a coal mine with regard to market direction. So Matt, you've often said that those phase 2 properties decline first in terms of number of sales, speed of sales, price, and they recover last as the market moves. Can you explain that theory a little bit?
So one of the things I've kind of discussed and I've pulled from other sources is this theory of the market that the market rises up a hill and down a hill like a train. And so what I've put at is the engine of the real estate market is the single family home. And it is the top of the train. And as properties rise, it's really the focus on what the single family homes are doing that drives a rising market. So as a single family home, it's the most desirable property that most people want. They want space, they want a yard, they want as many square feet as they can cram onto a piece of land. And so that kind of is the ideal for a lot of people. And so that drives the market. And as it climbs in value, it rises up the hill. And chained behind it all the way down to the bottom are all these different types of classification of property. So right behind a single family home would be a townhouse. A nice, it can be as large as a house, but it's attached, share some costs in a strata.
Typically phase 1 in Whistler, because that's the
most... So aside from that,
okay.
But being a townhouse, they'll be a little bit less expensive than a single family home, mostly because they don't have land, they don't have the yard, and land is a significant portion of a real estate value. And behind those will be condos, and tied into those are some, in our market, are rental condos. So there'll be those phase 1s that we talked about. Properties in townhomes and in condos that you can live in full time, you can rent out long term, you can rent out nightly. They have a lot of flexibility.
They're the most flexible.
So because of that flexibility, they're highly coveted. And so while the single family home starts rising in value, well, now they're pretty expensive. So I'm going to buy these townhomes that look like a great deal. And because now we're buying all the townhomes, they're going to start closing the gap and start rising up towards the single families. And now that the single families are too expensive, the townhomes are too expensive, we're going to start looking at condos in a large building because they're more affordable. And now they're going to start climbing up the hill. And so now that they're more expensive, we're going to start looking further and further down the hill, or down the train. And so behind condos, we have more restrictive condos, things that we were talking about, the phase 2 condo hotel. Now that's not something you can live in. So its inherent value isn't driven by the ability to occupy or rent it long term, but it's in its revenues as a hotel property and in its utility as a vacation property. And then in my theory, behind those phase 2s will be fractional properties we're buying quarter of the property or a tenth, which is the most common in our area. And then behind that will be leasehold properties which might, in our area, tend to have long-term 99 or 200-year leases of which you're buying. So they're usually beyond the owner's lifetime. So they act like you own it, but your interest in the land is derived by a lease, which at some point will need to be renewed or will expire. So as you get closer to the end time of the lease, the values on those can change until there's certainty in their renewal. So the way that I say that is, okay, so the train is driving up the hill. This is in an upward market. But what happens in a downward market? Well, in a downward market, it's not the single family leading it down the hill. They're going to retain their value the longest and the strongest. It's the bottom of the train that starts to fall back down the hill first. So the first things to drop are going to be the leasehold properties, then the fractionals, and then the phase 2 restrictive condos, and then the phase 1s and rental condos, then the townhomes, then the single family. It's going to go backwards down the hill. So there are some complications, especially with financing in a lot of these bottom of the train properties. The leaseholds are very difficult, if not impossible, to finance right now. So they're kind of cash purchases. Fractionals are in the same situation. Phase twos have not had strong financing options for a long time. There is the possibility, we've talked to our mortgage brokers, they think on an exception basis there could be financing on certain properties as long as they're of a certain size and the lender can finance them without any revenue. I think those are the restrictions that I've seen so far. But we focus, or I like to focus on the phase two condo as the canary of Whistler's market, because when they start to fall, it's a sign that some condos might drop in value and we might see some general numbers. But one of the things that does kind of buoy them and hold them is rental revenue. And as long as Whistler's visitors are coming and people are vacationing here, those revenues will be strong or continue to rise, which will keep them from falling very far, which keeps their relative value strong, which will kind of keep the train sticky on the hill, even in a downward market. But if we do see the phase two start to fall, it's usually going to be because our visitors are slowing down. We may not have as much hotel revenue, which means that these properties aren't making as much money, so they're going to decline in value, which is an indicator that we're going to see some declining prices across the train over time. And the lag between certain steps in the train can be long. Like it can be 6 to 18 months before a fall in phase twos is reflected in a fall in phase one condos or townhomes. But they're a really good thing to watch. So when I'm selling a phase two in an upward market, I'm watching the housing market to see that we're still rising. And when I'm selling a single family home, I'm watching the phase two market to see if the train's falling down the hill, if we see future price declines coming.
So this is really interesting because last week you listed and sold a phase two condo hotel. It was the highest sale price in the building ever. Mm-hmm. And we're hearing all of these headlines about the Canadian market declining and things like that. When we're looking at Whistler, we even see some stats coming out from Remax Canada and our very own stats that are indicating, average price coming down, but it's not indicated by your canary in a coal mine theory. So what do you think is happening relative to that?
Yeah, so and then that's what I kind of referenced there is, while we have some indications that nationwide there's a slowdown in home purchasing, partly predicated by the increase in interest rates, these decisions are really, the interest rates are really affecting the purchase of a certain class of property, but they're not really affecting Whistler investment properties. Number one, because the buyers of these properties aren't necessarily financing them, or they're not financing them traditionally, or they're not tied to that low level, like buying a home bank rate. But it's mostly because Whistler's visitor numbers are still extremely strong. Our revenues are showing very strong. This unit's revenues were strong and recovering back to 2019 levels after the pandemic did have holes in the revenue because of those multiple shutdowns in 2020 and 2021. But because the revenues are strong, this property was on the market. It sold very, very quickly. There is demand for them, and because of the revenues, they're going to hold that demand. So while we're going to keep watching it, because of that, our first instinct is to say, well, there doesn't seem to be an imminent fall coming, at least indicated by these phase two properties.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. We'll keep an eye on those single family homes and phase one condos as well. And we'll keep you posted with the stats coming out really soon.